You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 379.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. We are in the heart of preparations for Christmas around here, baking my holiday cookies. And that is one reason why I am so excited to bring you this episode today with Laura Klynstra. Laura is an award-winning author, senior art director for Revell Books, and a freelance graphic designer and photographer. Previously, Laura was an art director at Hyperion Books and HarperCollins Publishers in New York, and she is the author of the beautiful new book, The Homemade Pie Cookbook. This book contains 100 pie, tart, and galette recipes for every season. But of course, as you can imagine, today we're going to talk specifically about some of the pies that are in the winter chapter. Today on the show, I also dive into Laura's experience as an art director. So anyone who is curious about how cookbooks are art directed from a traditional publishing perspective or a self-publishing perspective is going to want to tune into this episode, lean in, listen to what Laura has to say, because she knows so much about how the design of a cookbook goes together. Laura is also the co-author and photographer of another book called Christmas Baking, a book called Gather and Graze, and she lives in Michigan with her family and a menagerie of dogs, cats, chickens, and ducks. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Laura Klynstra. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, excited that you're here. Can't wait to talk all about your beautiful book, The Homemade Pie Cookbook. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I'm primarily an art director. My main job is designing book covers and also directing the art for other designers, doing photo shoots and directing illustrators. But I've kind of launched into also writing and designing and photographing cookbooks.
Yes.
So it's been a fun, I learned so much in my career that I was able to apply to my own books.
Yes. So as an art director and designing book covers, let's talk a little bit about what that specific person in the life of a new book does. A lot of people, of course, that listen to this show love cookbooks. They read them, might want to write them, they collect them. But this is a job that we haven't specifically talked about on the show. So I'm excited that you're here to tell us a little bit about art direction and what it means in the life of a book.
Two different things between, say, a fiction book, which I also work on, and a cookbook. So we'll talk more about cookbooks for this, but I've also done a lot of cover design for novels as well, which is just totally different. But for art direction for a cookbook, you're looking at not just the cover, but the entire interior. And you want to have a through line with your photography that pulls together a beautiful package. And you want that cover to also reflect all of that. So you're thinking of everything in a cookbook that maybe you're not when you're doing a novel, you're really only thinking about the cover if you're the designer. But you want the type, the layout to be nice and clear and easy to follow. And you want those photos to be enticing. And in my case, I always want a photograph for every recipe. I don't want any, because I'm a visual person, I want there to be a photo for everything. So in my case, I'm thinking about all of those things at once in the beginning before I start. You can't just go out there and just randomly shoot a couple photos or, you really want to have a vision for it before you get started. And I pull together a mood board, and sometimes I poke around on Pinterest to see what sort of feeling I want to have. It's not even just the photography, it's the food styling as well, like the gathering of props and making sure that everything sort of meshes and tells your story. For instance, like if you're doing a photo, like one of the photos in the book that I'm looking at right now is the raspberry Linzer tart. And you want that to sort of tell a story of Christmas. So we've got like confectioner's sugar sort of spread, like sprinkled around, almost looking like snow. It just, you want to create this feeling of the season, in this case, a seasonal photo, and to make the food look delicious. And then put all of that together in a package that just makes sense and is easy for the reader to understand and to want to make.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone is listening to this and they're thinking about maybe wanting to write a cookbook, they want to approach a traditional publisher, when they're writing a proposal, and if they have a vision for their book, is that something they should communicate to the publisher, or are publishers really not as interested in that as they are in them being the writer of the book?
Oh, I think in a cookbook they are.
Yeah.
I think if you're writing a novel, I don't know that you need to put your vision of what you think the cover is at that point. But if you're writing a cookbook, yes, I think if you have photography, or even if you have a Pinterest board, this is what I want my photos to look like, this is my vision for the book, I think all of that is very relevant in a cookbook proposal.
Yeah. And a vision board set up on Pinterest that they could perhaps provide a link to. Then they could click over and look at the mood board. And you mentioned the font, the photos, the props, the food styling, and all of those things working together to tell the story of the book. And it just seems to me that this means that art direction for every book is so specific based on what the book is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I've done photography for other people's books as well as my own. And so I approach that differently. I've tried to make to shoot in a way that is the vision of the author. Like I tend to be a collector of antiques and different things. So my photos are really busy, but I've shot for people that are wanted a little bit more modern, contemporary, clean, we're talking linens and creams and whites and neutrals and those sorts of things. So you want to have a style that kind of flows through your book. And as an art director and a designer, I need to be able to do other people's styles, not just my own.
Yeah.
So,
definitely then including a vision for a book. And if someone is self-publishing, what do you recommend to someone who's self-publishing regarding art direction and photos and styling for their book?
I feel like you almost need to have at least a designer that you need to hire as a contractor, unless you're really familiar with design yourself. I think that most, people that are really savvy on Instagram could probably do their own food styling. I mean, if you've got a lot of experience doing photos on Instagram, you could do your styling and your photography yourself. But I think you might need a graphic designer to pull, if you're self-publishing, to pull all of those elements together and really, make everything mesh.
Yeah. So for nonfiction books, cookbooks even seem different to me than other types of nonfiction books.
Yes. It's like a lifestyle book is any lifestyle book, even a home decoration book is totally different than another nonfiction book. Yeah. Talking about a book that's fully illustrated and in full color is always just a much more intense visual process than say another kind of nonfiction.
And I even think on top of like a lifestyle or a home, like a decor book, the recipes on top of that make it even a unique book unto itself as well.
Yeah. And writing one is certainly a unique process because you're also testing because you don't want just them to be beautiful photos. You want them to work for everybody who goes home and tries to make them. You want to make sure that everything is clear and that they have successful recipes. Otherwise, what good is it?
Exactly. So let's talk then about, you also do art direction for fiction books, so for novels. So let's dive into that just a little bit so that people can understand what you do mostly for a novel then when it comes to art direction.
So when we get I do it. I work for a publisher, so I do that, but I also freelance for other publishers. So it's a little bit different process, but for when I'm working on my own company, I'll get a brief and the author will tell me what she or he thinks the cover should look like. Just to take an example, like a historical fiction, World War II fiction, I'm going to get a description of what the character looks like, and then maybe a little bit about what the character is like and where the character is. Like especially World War II fiction, spread out in Paris or London or some sort of beautiful European city. And then I'm going to go start looking for bits and pieces, and I'm going to put those together. It's never usually like I find a photo that's perfect. And then, there's a lot of Photoshop work involved. There's one cover I worked on called Lilac Girls, which has sold over 1 million copies and a big New York Times bestseller. That one has multiple pieces that I put together, and they were historical photographs, and then they were put together and then hand colorized so that there's color to the photo.
Yeah.
So again, you want, a big, beautiful type. You want it to just kind of be something that somebody wants to pick up and just wants to own. So it has to be a good novel cover is going to also be beautiful, I think.
Yeah.
So especially women's fiction.
Yeah, because that's really so different than a cookbook, because that one piece of art on the cover and the font that you choose, the type, the way it looks, that really draws people into the story as well. But that's like the only thing that you have in a novel versus a cookbook. You can page through a cookbook and see so many different pages, right. Photographs. Yeah, yes.
But I think there's a similarity, I feel like, too, because there's a sort of poetry to designing a book cover. I think that it does tell a story. In a way, like it conveys a mood, I guess, is maybe more of what it's doing than telling a story. Because I don't ever want my covers, like fiction covers, to be literal. Like, oh, this is an actual scene from the book. You want to give the reader a feel for what they're going to get, and that's why so many World War II novels have similar features to their covers, because they want people to be like, oh yeah, I know what this book is because I can just see it, because it's like a branded look of this is what a World War II fiction novel looks like. But you also want it to be unique enough that it stands out. So it's a bit of a chore, but
I think it's fascinating because you're looking for a mood or a feeling for both of them. It's just two completely different kinds of books.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's why I love to do the photography for my cookbooks, because I do feel like that I'm doing, like when I'm laying out my table, I feel like it's a little bit like designing a cover where I'm taking bits and pieces but they're just physical, real things that I'm taking from different places and laying them out. Whereas when I'm doing a book cover, I'm taking bits and pieces from the world of photography and putting them together in Photoshop.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a big collage.
Yeah, I think that's right. So you, in your book, the Homemade Pie Cookbook, was this published by the publisher that you work for then?
Yes. This one is. Yep.
Yeah. So published by the publisher you work for, you typically just do the art direction for this. But in this book, of course, it's completely different, because you not only did the art direction and all the photography, but you wrote the book as well.
Yeah. So it was a busy year.
Yes. Yes. And was this your idea to propose this book to them, or did they approach you about it, or what's the story of the actual publication of the book?
Well, I published 2 books with Skyhorse Publishing before this. And the editor that I worked with at Skyhorse asked me, she's like, I wish I had a pie cookbook. So I'm like, okay, I'll write a proposal for a pie cookbook, which I was going to send to them. But then an editor at Revell, part of Baker Publishing Group, said, I want to see that proposal too. Because she and I worked together on other cookbooks. So she said, I want to see it too. So she did. She took a look at it, and she took it to Pubboard, and they decided to take it. And they offered a better advance than the other publishers. So that's where it landed.
Yeah. I wonder if you would have been able to art direct if you had published with Skyhorse.
Oh yeah, they can, because they have very low level. They don't put as much money into the art and the design. So they're happy to get free design and free art.
Yeah. So it would have been fine if you.
They would have let me. The other 2 books, I did all the design and the photography for as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So this book is all about pie, 100 pie, tart, and galette recipes for every season. So let's dive in to talk a little bit about the book and your journey from idea to book. You tell us how you proposed it, but what's your thought process when you start a cookbook project?
So I always start with the table of contents, which is basically a roadmap for I guess for any book, but for a cookbook, it really is like, and I usually start with 100 recipes is usually my goal. I did 100 recipes in Christmas baking. And then this one has 100 pies. It has more recipes than that because there's crust and topping recipes. But so I started with those 100 pies and I divided them into 25 recipes per season. And then I just try to get creative with what those pies might be in each season. And I developed maybe 10 to 12 of those recipes before I did the proposal. Like, so here's my list of my goal list of these are the recipes I want to do. And some of them I tried and didn't, I didn't like how they turned out. So then I would come up with a different one for that. But that first 100 recipes was my roadmap. And then when I did my proposal, because I'm a designer and photographer, I did a design for the proposal. So when I actually turned in the proposal, it wasn't just a Microsoft Word document. It was a laid out, designed PDF, which I did in InDesign. So I did the photography for those, I think 10 to 12 recipes, the recipes themselves and the design. And then I also had to write other information, marketing information and other proposal information in there. But I made my proposal very visual.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to this and they want to pitch an idea to a publisher, but they don't plan to be the designer or the photographer, what do you recommend they do in terms of their proposal?
Well, I think just be very, very clear about what's going to be in the book. I would have a full table of contents for one thing, and then some of the sample recipes, but also that maybe a visual board of what you would want, like maybe on Pinterest, what you think your recipe should look like. Or if you are somebody who's posting on Instagram to include some of the photos that you've shot of your recipes. A publisher is going to know that maybe you're not a professional photographer, and that's okay. They just want to see. I think just seeing, oh, this is what this recipe looks like is helpful for the publisher.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the most exciting things about writing a book is if someone's listening and you don't like design or photography, being traditionally published means that you have access to someone like you who helps to bring the book to life. So right. I don't want anybody to ever think that they couldn't do a book like this because they can't do art direction or design or photography, because that's why someone like you exists in the publishing world.
Yeah. Most cases you are not going to be the photographer of your book. Yeah. Most of them.
Yeah. So I think a designed proposal, if you're pitching yourself as that person, but certainly not necessary if you're just going to be the one who's going to be writing the book.
Correct.
And then letting an expert take over in terms of the art direction and the design.
Yeah.
So let's talk your book concept. You talk about there being 3 parts to every pie. Let's discuss the parts to a pie and what you might recommend that people know about these different parts.
Okay. So the book is organized by those parts. The first major chapter is all about crusts. And because this is not just pies, it's also tarts. There's tart crusts, which are more like a shortbread cookie. So it's a totally different process to make a tart crust than it is to make a pie crust. So there's just a big variety of crust recipes and also all the how-to information. That's your base of any pie or tart is the crust. And then there's 100 pie recipes in the middle of the book, which is the bulk of the book. And that would be considered your fillings. And then I also do a chapter that maybe you don't typically think you need for a pie, but there's a whole chapter on garnishing and toppings for pies. And that's just a way to elevate your pies, both with how they taste, like cream cheese, whipped cream, and chocolate sauce and different things, but also how they look. So there's a way to, we often think of cakes as being decorated, but you can also decorate pies. And I give you a lot of tips on how to make those, especially this time of year. You kind of want a little bit of extra flair on your whatever you're bringing to your holiday parties. Like things like sugared cranberries. If you top a tart with sugared cranberries and rosemary, it has like this beautiful Christmas look to it. There's just lots of little tips and tricks for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think one thing that the photography in this book in particular allows people to see is how these little flourishes really do take a pie, such as a cranberry pie, and it adds such a nice element to add the sugared cranberries and the rosemary to really elevate the look of the pie through some very simple things that people can do. So I think for this book, having the photography really gives some inspiration.
Yeah, we first eat with our eyes. So having a beautiful, I don't want to get anybody to think they have to be perfect, but it's nice to do a little bit of extra flair if you can.
Yeah. Now, some people have a roadblock about pie and making pie crust. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is a lot of us grow up learning how to make cakes and cookies. And it's a different process that when you're mixing a cake or a cookie dough, it's always going to be you're creaming the butter with the sugar and the eggs to start. The thing that you need to remember when making a pie crust, not a tart crust, but a pie crust, is that the butter has to be cold, and your goal is not to cream it together, but to cut it into pieces. And so there's different ways that you can do that. But if you take care to keep your butter cold and just follow a couple of simple steps, you can make delicious homemade pie dough pretty easily. One of the things I do, and when I make a lot of pie dough, is I use the pastry attachment on my KitchenAid mixer, which cuts butter instead of creaming butter. You can do it with a food processor, or you can also do it by hand or with one of those old-fashioned pastry blenders. Mm-hmm. But I don't like those pastry blenders because it feels like the butter always gets stuck inside those, and you're like kind of. But the pastry attachment on the KitchenAid is the fastest, best way I've ever found to do pie dough, because I think the food processor over processes your butter. It ends up getting to be too small. Whereas this attachment, you want some lumps of butter still in your dough when you're making a pie crust, and that this attachment makes it easy to get there. But otherwise, do it by hand. Yeah. And then the other thing I think people forget to do is they'll go straight from making their dough to rolling it out. You need to get that butter cold again. So you wrap it up, put it in the refrigerator, and get it cold. And then when you first get it out of the refrigerator, it might be too hard to roll out, but you're kind of looking for that moment when it's just soft enough to roll out, but not. So I think it's like I think that may be why people don't like to do their own crust, because there are a few little tips and tricks and temperature, and it's a little bit fussy and it's messy, but I do think it's a better finished product. It's certainly, if you look at the ingredients in some of the packaged pie doughs, it's definitely healthier. I mean, I don't know if you can call it healthy, but there's no processed anything in it.
It's
no
basically flour,
oils or anything like that. So
butter, flour, salt.
Yeah.
Maybe
whole foods, but maybe not the healthiest whole foods, but still whole foods.
Yeah. Not a lot of the additives, like you said.
Right.
And I think keeping everything cold makes a world of difference. And I think pie crust is something that I have learned how to do. And I think the secret for me was finding a recipe that I was comfortable with, I got good results with, and I just continue to use that recipe for pie crust if I'm making savory pie or a sweet pie, or just an all butter pie crust that I know works. And I think it's just like anything else. And I think you probably practice. Mm-hmm. And
the other thing I do too is I'll make I usually do a minimum of 4 pie doughs at one thing, and then I'll wrap them and freeze whatever I don't need at that particular recipe.
Yeah,
because it's just so nice to be able to pull one disc of dough out and be ready to go.
Yeah. Pie. That's great. That's a great tip. So let's talk about perfection then. You mentioned it briefly, but what you have a message about perfection related to pies.
Yeah, I called it rustic beautiful, which means in my mind of how I'm looking at how to make pies is it needs to look handmade. So don't worry about it looking perfect. If it looks perfect, it's not going to look handmade. You want whoever you're serving your pie to know that you did not just go to the store and buy it, or that you didn't use a factory made pie crust. So don't go for perfection, because if you do, you're going to be disappointed, because it's almost, when you're baking a pie, the crust like morphs in the oven, and there's, things are just never going to be perfect. So you can make beautiful pies, but don't aim for perfect pies that's my message.
Yeah. And I think in your photography, you brought the rustic, beautiful, and pies looking handmade through in the photos.
There were a couple I was like, this isn't quite the best, but you know what? I'm going to photograph it anyway, because this is real.
Exactly.
This is how they actually turn out sometimes.
Yeah. And you use cast iron in some of the shots. Of course, galettes shaped without any particular pie dish.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the antiques forks and pie servers, and really gave it a feel for pies from a home kitchen, and beautiful ways to present them, and simply as well, and let the pie really be the star of the show.
Mm-hmm.
You have other types of pies, though, other than just, the kinds of pies we might think about. Tell us about some of the other styles.
Like the galettes, or just like the...
Yeah, galettes, and I see oatmeal cream pie.
Oh, yeah, because I was doing 100 pies. I was like, you know what? I want to do a couple. There's a whoopie pie and an oatmeal cream pie. I'm like, they're technically pies, but but they're kind of cookies. They're kind of sandwich cookies as well. So there's that. But I also did a bunch of ice cream pies. I thought that was kind of a fun. And those have all homemade ice cream recipes in them. You could, if you didn't have an ice cream machine, you could swap in like a vanilla ice cream probably for some of them. But yeah, I tried to think outside of the pie box because 100 is so many pies. And so sometimes I would think about different cookies that I liked. What kind of, like the Linzer Tart was based on a Linzer cookie recipe that I make for Christmas. So I kind of converted the cookie dough recipe into a crust dough, and then the filling is raspberry jam. And so it's, everything was, like there's a creamsicle chiffon pie that's supposed to taste like the creamsicle, frozen treats that you could get, or used to be able to get. I'm not sure if they still call them creamsicles or not. Yeah. But, I like to use a lot of inspiration of other desserts to put into, there's a cinnamon roll blueberry apple pie, which has like these little, they're crust, but they look like little cinnamon rolls. It's a really cute one.
So we're in the holiday season now, and wonder if you would maybe give us some suggested pies for this time of year, with Christmas and the winter holidays just around the corner.
Yep. There's, we briefly talked about the cranberry tart. It's called the white chocolate cranberry tart. That one is a really beautiful one to bring to a party, especially if you do the sugared cranberries. There's a cranberry apple pie. I did a lot of different versions of apple pie because I think that it's kind of our classic, but like, how can we make them different? And when you put the cranberries in, it turns the entire interior of that pie red, which it's very tart because of the cranberries. It's a fun way of using cranberries. There's a spiced gingerbread tart, which is kind of like got a gingerbread cookie crust, and then a creamy filling. The peppermint icebox pie is really pretty and super easy. Like it doesn't even have that many ingredients. It's just like kind of more like whipping cream and cream cheese, and then adding the peppermint extract. And then I add a little bit of pink to it, so it has a, really pretty. And then I turned magic bars, which I think are a typical, it's like a staple bar recipe that people make at the holidays quite often. I turned that into a pie. So it's similar to the bars, but there's kind of a cookie bottom to it. And it has a graham cracker crust. And that just is, to me, that always reads holiday because we always have made that. And then I mentioned before the Linzer tart. That's another one that's a good holiday pie. And all of these can be garnished up and just look really beautiful on a holiday spread.
Yeah, and you have a lot of nice tips for with a pie dough, making lattice tops, braided edges.
Yeah, there's some of that in the crust chapter. There's some how-tos and just some general ideas of what you can do to to make your pies a little bit more special. But again, don't try to make them perfect. Just
Yes. Yeah.
have some
And again,
fun.
the photos can really add some inspiration for everyone to even cutting out shapes that match maybe the ingredients in the pie to decorate the top. A lot of really neat ways to elevate again the look of them. And I think that you did a great job balancing the look of them without them being perfect. It's definitely, I love like what you said, the rustically beautiful pies.
Yeah, rustic beautiful. When I started approaching this, because as a visual person, you want everything to be perfect. And I said, you know what, I have to come up with some way to make this possible for me to do it, because I knew I couldn't make perfect pies. I'm like, there are people out there that can. There's people that are just like, but to me, if you want your crust to really hold when you bake it, it has to have more flour in it. And then it doesn't taste as good. Like my experience is when I make a crust or when I make a cookie that will hold its shape, it doesn't taste good. So it's more important that it tastes good than it looks perfect.
Right. Yeah.
So
for sure,
get that balance of butter and flour right, and for taste, not for physical appearance.
Yeah. So writing a cookbook means you have to develop and test the recipes. Tell us a little bit about what it was like developing and testing 100 pie recipes.
It was busy, and there was a lot of pie eating at my house. And then it became kind of a standard situation where once the pie came out, everybody was like, was that one we can eat, or is that one that's going to go get photographed? And then once it got photographed, then people could eat it. But there were some that were just for tasting to figure out if it was working, and some that were, but it was a constant pie festival at this house for over a year.
Yeah.
But some of them are based on other things that I already know work. So then it's like kind of a combination of different parts. So those were easier to develop because I've already worked with, like, maybe the for instance, there's a peanut butter cup pie, and the base of the pie is kind of like those peanut butter bars. So, and I've made those many times, so I have kind of know that that's what works. And then the top is like a chocolate mousse, and I've made that before, and so I know what works. With that one, I'm more working on the scale of how much we need of that. I already know that this combination of ingredients with this process will work. I just need to scale it to the right amount for a pie. But some of them are completely like, I'm just guessing. So like some of those are failures and you have to start over, and it's just, Right. So they're not all hard, but some of them are hard, and some of them just get cut because they're like, nah, it's just not worth it. It's not working. But,
yeah, I think that's important to point out, because not everything always makes the cut. And that's the whole purpose of going through the development of something, is you truly want to have recipes in the end result that, people are going to enjoy and get good results with. And the amount of work they put into something, it's worth it on the end. You also have savory pies. Why don't you talk a little bit about the savory pies in every chapter and how you work those in?
So those were probably the easier ones to work in because they became dinner when I was making them. So I was able to double those up as a meal. But those are very popular too for people that have tasted the pies in this book. A lot of people love the savory ones. For the winter chapter, there's a potato bacon Gruyere galette, which is a great side to bring to any party. There's also a sausage ricotta pie, which is kind of like a pizza, but it's like a deep dish pizza made with pie crust instead of pie dough. Everybody loves that one too. There's a cranberry brie skillet galette, which is good for like a charcuterie board. You can serve it with a bunch of other things for like maybe a New Year's Eve party. Some of the other ones are just like trying to take advantage of the seasonal vegetables. There's a corn, it's a tomatillo and corn galette. That's really, really good. I based that one on one of my favorite enchilada recipes. So, and then there's a asparagus galette, which is nice because like in spring, I live in Michigan where we get really cold winters, and the first thing that comes up is the asparagus. And so it's nice to get something fresh that one's a fun one to make in the spring.
Yeah, great. Those all sound delicious. So as you're going through this, in the meantime, you're also working a full-time job. You're probably doing some posting on social media.
Not enough. That's one of my things. I think people, I don't know how people can post so many things on social media. Maybe they don't have full-time jobs on top of it all. But
yeah, that's always a challenge for people that are working and writing cookbooks to post on social media and to build the brand. But any tips for anyone who's thinking about writing a cookbook that you might have?
You mean for like balancing the time?
Yeah, balancing time, thinking about their idea. Yeah.
I guess one of my tips would be just to start. Like if you've got an idea, just start. You don't have to do the whole thing. Just do a couple of the recipes, develop them, take photos, and just get started. Because sometimes I think we have a huge block about starting something. Like we think, oh, it's too big, I can't do it. Just the thing about a cookbook is that you can tackle it one recipe at a time.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing was I had to take PTO to do my photography for some of these because I needed the daylight, and the weekends just weren't enough to do the whole thing. So I was taking time off from work to work, but that was just, I think you have to be a little bit of a workaholic if you're going to do a book and a full-time job.
Yeah. And be the art director and photographer for the book also. Because, if you're just writing and working on the recipes, you still have to bake them and, make sure they all work. But it's almost like you took a break from your work and took PTO to do the work that you would have been doing as the publisher, as the art director.
Yeah. I'm doing I'm doing my day job as a freelance in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think just getting started does help. I think you started with a table of contents. Like you said, you started developing some recipes, taking some pictures. Once you can start to kind of see it taking shape, narrowing down what you're going to work on, I think it does really make it a lot more manageable and doable because you have a better vision for what you might want to do. And again,
and I think if you tackle it one recipe at a time, it's a different. It just seems more manageable to me than like writing a novel would feel like to me.
Yeah, it's such a great tip though. But I guess if you wrote a novel, it's like, okay, the next scene that might take place or the next event. It's really just a matter of focusing on that, I think, and writing about that. I heard it said once someone was caring for maybe an ill family member and they wrote a story about it. And they said they just really took it hour by hour. That was all they could really do. And I think that just goes to show us that in any big thing that feels so big, just the next step, the next thing, the next recipe, the next hour, if we follow that and we do the next hour and the next recipe, it does eventually builds momentum. We have the compounding effect of getting work done, and it feels so much better actually to do that than to be blocked by starting something that we think feels big.
Yeah, and I think you want to do something that you love too. Like work on a book that has recipes that you love. And for me, I love the visuals, so that was, it's part of the recipe development, what it looks like for me. And I get all stressed out while I'm doing it, but when I'm done and I have that photo, I'm like, that's my moment where I feel like this is all worth it to do. And because I do love all those visuals and that final package.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful book. Now I can tell with some of your photos, if you maybe want to talk about this one aspect for people in case they are doing their own photography or they're maybe working on a self-publishing project. And that's the concept of using photos as a background on a page and leaving space. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any tips or if you can kind of explain what I was just trying to describe.
Yeah. So, it's basically
like your pie dough recipes, you have like a pie in the corner, but you can tell that the background it's the page.
It's something. Yes. So for those kinds of things, if you think that you might want to, and this is one of those things, again, that helps if you're both the designer and the photographer. So I knew which photos I needed to have extra white background for, because I knew how much, because I knew where the type was going to go. As a matter of fact, when I was designing this, I was doing some of the photography at the same time, which is not something that everybody's going to be able to do. But if you know, for instance, that you might want type to go on top of the background, you just kind of have to back off from that photo. You need like a white marble background. I also use a white, it's like an old table that I got from a vintage, from an antique market. And then I painted white and then roughed up a little bit so you can see some texture on it. But you're going to want, if you want to have type on top of a photo, you're going to want a pretty white, fairly white space, or something completely dark, which I don't know if I did that in this book, because I think this is more of a brighter background book. But you could have like a black background and knock type out, like white type on top of black. But I would recommend for starting to stick with whitish backgrounds. But you want to have some texture in there, otherwise people won't even know it's,
Right.
But yeah, one thing I don't like to see in a cookbook is like a little square there are some, like I have that with my processes, there's squares, but like you have a recipe and then there's a little square photo of the pie or something I want that photo to blend into the whole page design.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks beautiful the way you did it. You also have a great tip section, and this might be something that we can kind of wrap up talking about the book related to, and that is if you want to gift homemade pies. And a lot of times this time of the year, people will gift Christmas cookies or cookies and pack them in a box, but you have some really nice tips for how to gift pie.
Yeah, well, you can buy boxes online to start with. The other thing that you could do if you wanted to do if you were given away to multiple people, you could create a pie sampler box. So then I recommend selecting pies that cut well, because some of them, like an apple pie maybe, or a cherry pie might just kind of, if you tried to make pieces of it, it might just kind of flow all over the container. So you wouldn't want to do that, but you select pies that would be good for that. The other thing is you can do like mini pies, wrap them in like a nice, like an acetate type, and with a ribbon on it. You could use disposable pie dishes for if you're going to gift them. You don't want to. But the other thing that's really handy is a Tart pan will come right off from the Tart, so those make good gifts. You always have to try to figure out how to remove the pan from the gift. Right. That way, unless you want to gift somebody,
give the Tart pan as a gift and put a pie in it. I think that what you're saying too, you don't want to place the burden of returning a dish on the person that's receiving the gift.
Right.
Yeah, here's a pie, but by the way, return that pan to me. Yeah. So some really nice tips. I love the idea of the pie sampler and pies that cut well. And if you make 6 different pies and you cut them in pieces, then you could conceivably, you cut it into 8 pieces, you could make 8 boxes with these 6 different types of pie in it. And that makes a really fun, unique gift.
Yeah, people love that. People, that's one of the things about Thanksgiving that people love about pie is they like not just one pie, but like multiple, and they want to have a little tiny piece of everything because they just want to try everything.
Yeah, we would always laugh at one of my grandmothers. That was always her answer. We would say, "What kind of pie do you want?" And I want a little bit of everything. She always wanted to try them all. And, cut small slices, and everybody gets to enjoy a flavor of every pie that's on the table. You also have a nice little feature about where the yield is. You have pairings, and you have a gluten-free symbol, and of course you have the page number and what season it's in. I think those kinds of little things make this cookbook very valuable, because people probably do wonder, related to gluten and things like that, about pies.
Yeah, when I was designing it, I wanted to have this little, it's like a little tag on the bottom of each recipe that gives you some references. It tells the season that you're in and the page number. But a lot, you can mix and match the crusts. It's like I'm giving you a recommendation on what crust it is, but if you want to take, some of the fillings are naturally gluten-free. So all you'd have to do then is just make one of the gluten-free crust recipes to make the pie into a gluten-free pie. So those are marked. They say it's got a GF little logo on it. That means that you can convert this to gluten-free by just changing the crust to the gluten-free. And then I also came up with a little marker for ones that are a little bit faster, so that you're like, oh, I don't have a lot of time. I want to make one of the easier ones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Very good. So it's wonderful to have included those as well. Well, it's a beautiful book, the Homemade Pie Cookbook. And if you're looking for a gift for this time of year for yourself or someone else, Laura's going to tell us here at the end how everybody can access that. But first, before we dive into that, I would love to know, as we're wrapping up, Laura, if you have a favorite cookbook that has influenced your kitchen life.
The one that I use the most often is the Martha Stewart Baking Handbook. And that is just because it seems to cover everything. If you want a basis for some, like here, I want to make a cake and then I'm going to make it my own, but I know this cake recipe is going to work. So that book is, I actually have two copies, one because I have two kitchens and I have one in each kitchen just because I know I'm going to have the like basic baking recipe that's going to work for what I know it's going to work because I've tested a lot of them and they all work.
Yeah.
But I also like the Baked from Scratch series. Have you ever seen those cookbooks? They're really huge and there's a bunch of them. And then I like that one because it has so many varieties of things in them.
So it's a series, then they have different types of things, different types of
I think
goods.
it's based on a magazine, and that's like it has an editor rather than one author.
Yeah.
And there's just so many recipes in one volume, and then I think there's like up to like 8 volumes now. So
wow.
I do collect those as well. Those are fun.
Nice. That is fun, and it's great to hear you're collecting them. Those are the kinds of things that people that listen to this show love to hear. So that's the Baked from Scratch series, which sounds like something that might be fun to have on the shelf.
And those too. So pretty much if I'm going to love a book, it's going to have probably a photograph of every recipe as well.
Yeah. You get inspiration also from the art direction of books.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. Looking at what other people do, how they put books together. One thing I've noticed and something that we've seen more recently is illustrations also in cookbooks.
Yep. I've been seeing that too.
Yeah.
That's not something that I would do, but yeah, it's.
Yeah, something that I won a book recently, and they actually had illustrations throughout, and then they set the photos in a signature in the middle, kind of hearkening back to the way books were done.
Used to do them.
Yeah, and because they wanted a photo of every recipe, and I guess it was maybe a cost-saving measure, and so it's beautiful the way they laid the photos out and the way they grouped things together for the signature of photos, and it really was like a throwback to the way some cookbooks used to be done. So it's kind of neat to see that twist in 2025.
Yeah, well, illustration is a big thing in fiction right now too. It's just kind of coming back with a vengeance. There was a time when we didn't put illustrations on covers at all, and now it's like on half of them, I'd say.
Yeah. So what's on the horizon for art direction for cookbooks? Are you seeing anything coming down the pike that you think's been interesting?
I have a book I'm going to be working on. I don't think it's announced yet, but I have a contract to do the photography for that I'm excited about. And then I have a concept for a couple of books that I'd like to write if I find publishers for them.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think once you learn how to write a proposal and you can conceive of an idea, it is kind of fun to pitch it and see if somebody will take you up on it. And dive in again to all the development, testing, and photography.
It's a fun job, but it's a job.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in connecting with you online or buying a copy of your book, how can they do that?
My publisher also is a bookseller, so we have a bakerbookhouse.com. You can purchase it there. It's always on sale. Or I think it's always on sale there. I also can you can connect with me on Instagram at Spice and Sugar Table. And also that's Instagram account that I do with a friend who I also wrote a book with called Gather and Graze. But then I also have a personal one that has a lot of pie stuff on it too. And that's just Laura Klynstra Instagram.
Great. Very good. Well, I'll link to those in the show notes. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, telling us all about your beautiful book, The Homemade Pie Cookbook. And I wish you a terrific holiday season and have fun promoting and talking about your book.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.